I'm National Chess Master Bryan Tillis, and I'd like to teach you chess in a series I'm calling Let's Play Chess. In this introductory video, I'm going to be covering all of the basics that you need to know to start a chess game. And in subsequent videos, you're going to see how I actually teach my students in the classroom in video 2, Piece Movement. So you can skip that one along if you're satisfied with this video. Video 3, we're going to be taking a look at strategy of checkmates, how you actually win games in chess. And then in the final video, we're going to be taking a look at my personal favorite thing to discuss with chess players, strategy and opening dynamics. How do I start the game? What do I do? Why am I doing it? So stay along with us for this series. And without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in to our board. Because you got to start with the surface. Why not? And if you notice on any tournament chess board, you got yourself A through H on the bottom and 1 through 8 on the side. Well, chess players use this grid in order to write down their moves. And as we discuss the pieces, we simply will be abbreviating them when writing our moves. So if you've seen a great series on Netflix, The Queen's Gambit, you'll see at times the players are writing down their moves. This is in order to keep records of the games. Because just like history, if we don't write them down, they will be forgotten. And how can you learn from your mistakes and get better if you don't have a record of your games? So, we have our board. Next up, let's talk about our pieces. And one of the first things you need is knowing what all the pieces are called. Just from a respect basis. My experience is, this is not a pony, and this is not a castle. I mean, it's cute for a while, but let's learn the actual names of our pieces. We have the pawn. After the pawn, we have the knight. Then the bishop. The rook. And then the royalty, the queen, and the king. And we're going to go through one by one with our pieces and see the rules with them. So let's go ahead and start with our most important piece, the king. Now keep in mind, the king, he can move one square in any direction. That means any direction he can move one square. And he can capture one square as well, which we'll see in one of our future diagrams, capturing pieces, taking our opponent's pieces and putting them off the board. Understandably, the more pieces you have, typically the bigger advantage you have. And if your opponent is giving you free pieces, we take them. We're also going to be talking about the concept of how to win in chess. So the king is the most important piece because when he is attacked, if he cannot get out of the attack, the game is over. That is checkmate. So we're going to have 3 terms for understanding how games end when studying the king. Check, and check is defined as when the king is attacked by an opponent's piece, and he can get out of the attack. Checkmate is when the king is attacked by your opponent's pieces, and no matter what, you cannot get out of the attack. The game is over. That's a loss. Then finally, we have stalemate, which we'll see in a future diagram, and this has 3 results in chess for us. You can win, you can lose, or you can draw or tie a game of chess. And in tournaments, we don't just have knockout tournaments where 2 players play. If one guy loses, he goes home. We have a scoring system in chess where if you win a game, you get a point. If you draw a game, you get 1/2 of a point, and if you lose, you get 0 points. This way, in a tournament, which is typically 5 games, if you're winning, say you won your first 2 games, you're going to play someone else who won their first 2 games. If you're losing, you lost your first 2 games, you're going to play someone else who also lost their first 2 games. So by the end of the tournament, you should be playing someone near your strength, theoretically, and everybody gets to play. So let's continue after the king and talk about the most powerful piece in chess. The king is the most important piece because if he gets checkmated, you lose. The queen is the most powerful piece because of all that she can do. Now let me show you where all this queen could move. I'm going to highlight every square that this queen can move with our arrows. And what we notice here is she is the master. Verticals, horizontals, and diagonals. She can move anywhere that you see the arrow pointing. Next up, let's see actually how these pieces move with our king and queen. So I'm going to make a few moves here to emphasize how things work. Now, one, if I was to say move my queen right here, and I love it on Lee Chess that when I click the piece, it shows all the legal squares that I can move, so it's very great to practice on here. So if I moved my queen here, notice how I can't just continue moving past this queen when I click. I, in fact, can capture the white queen. And when you capture a piece, you put it on the square and you would simply remove it and put it off to the side of the board. So that would be capturing. So it needs to be in the field of vision. There's only one piece that can jump over others, and that is the knight, and we're going to be getting to him shortly. All the other pieces are limited by what's in front of them. So the queen may be most powerful, but if she's stuck in the corner surrounded by pieces, she can't move. So in this case, let's talk about how the king captures now. If I was to place the queen here, notice how the king lights up in red. This is actually check because I'm attacking the king. Well, there are 3 rules to check. I can either capture the piece that's attacking me, block with one of my friendly pieces, or run. In this case, we can get out of check 2 ways. We can run, or we can capture the piece attacking us. So the king, like I said, 1 square in any direction, can capture the queen in this scenario. Now, let's see an example of checkmate, how we could win the game. I'm going to place my queen here. Well, how come the king can't take it? Because he would be moving into an attack. He would be moving into check. Remember the white king, he moves 1 square in any direction. So he is defending the square. And this is a good thing to remember in chess. You can never capture a king. And kings can never touch because that would be mutual check. You would be moving into the attack or moving into check. In this case, the king protects the queen attacks the king, and there is no move that the black king can make to get out of check or capture the queen. This queen can't help because if she was here, she could help, but here she can do nothing. So now, I talked about 3 results. So let's look at checkmate versus stalemate. So we saw one example of checkmate there, and here we could do checkmate again with, say, this move. King protects the queen, queen attacks the king, and in video 3, I'm going to go over all of the basic checkmates and show the technique with that. So if you want to practice checkmates, definitely take a look at that video. But here's where a lot of people go wrong. Say, if I put the queen here, this is a no-no square because the black king cannot move. And yet, let's see the difference. Here, the queen is attacking the king in anywhere he can move. Here, the queen is attacking all the squares around the king, but not the square the king is on. It's black's move. And we know that a king cannot move into check. So what's happened here is black can't move, the game is over. And since he's safe, the game is a tie. White messed up badly here. He turned an easy win into a draw. And keep in mind in tournament play, that's a big deal. A point versus half of a point could make a major difference in how you finish in a tournament. So that's why I strongly recommend practicing checkmates to make sure that this horror story does not happen to you. So we're moving right along. We've learned our king, we've learned our queen, the royalty, the 2 prominent pieces that we only have 1 of. Now let's take a look at the next in line, the rook. Well, how do you capture and how do you move with a rook? Well, a rook, he moves in long verticals and horizontals. So the queen, She has long verticals, horizontals, and diagonals. The rook, just the plus sign, verticals and horizontals. So in this case, it is white to move. Can white capture any piece? If you answered yes, you're absolutely right. The white rook can capture the queen here. And that would be a good move. Black only has a king left, and black has no way of winning the game at this point with just a king. Remember, kings can never touch, and you can never capture a king. So now let's move right along to our bishop. Well, the bishop, he moves in long diagonals. So when learning the queen, if you've learned the rook and bishop, the queen is a combination of the powers of the rook and bishop. The rook, long verticals and horizontals. The bishop, long diagonals. So let's see in this position how our bishop could move and capture. Can our bishop jump over our king? No. The only piece that can jump over others is the knight, which we're going to be covering next. In this case, I'm giving you three options. The bishop can capture the other bishop, the bishop can capture the rook, or the bishop can capture the queen. Which piece would you want given these three captures? Well, there's a really old system of piece value in chess, and I like to think of it as the powers of the pieces and what they can do. And the bishop, he's typically considered to be worth 3, as well as the knight. Pawns are only considered to be worth 1. But in this case, rooks 5 and queen 9, because the queen is the most powerful piece. So the best move in this case would be to capture the queen. And remember, rooks move in long verticals and horizontals, so he could capture, as well as black also could capture this bishop, because diagonal. So keep that in mind. Bishops move in long diagonals. So now on to our knight. And the knight is easily the most complicated piece, because as soon as you're told he moves in an L-shaped pattern, what? So keep in mind with the knights, he is the only jumping piece. He can jump over the other pieces in that L-shaped pattern. And you can only capture a piece where the knight is landing. So let's see the landing and let's see the L. So first of all, it's a geometric L. So as we're turning it, you'll be able to see it. So let me highlight the squares that this knight could move to. So let's see our L-shaped pattern. L, 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 or you could look at it that way, L. As long as you're finding your L, you're good to go with the knight. And those are our L's. So let's look at capturing with the knight and talk a little bit about basic tactics. In this case, the knight can move in an L-shaped pattern. Can he capture anything in this position? Hopefully you said no, because in this case, the knight cannot capture the bishop, even though it's passing through our L, or we can move here or here. You have to be jumping on the square. So this bishop would need to be on the E4 square for us to capture. But in this case, we have a much better move in knight E4 check. Notice how the knight is attacking the king. And when the king is attacked, we must get out of check. So when the king moves, now can we capture anything? Yes, we're able to capture the queen. And now at this point, this is actually a drawn position because you cannot win with just a king and bishop. You also can't win with just a king and knight. In the checkmates video, you will see us winning with the queen, with the rook, with the queen and rook, and with just the rook. Very important to practice those basic checkmates to be able to win games effectively. Next, we have the pawn. And the pawn we have most expendable in chess. We start with 8 of these guys, and he's kind of tough. A little bit tougher than the knight, extra rules with the pawns. So let's start with a bunch of pawns on the board. Well, the pawn may be weak, but he has such great potential. Firstly, if a pawn makes it from a starting position all the way to the other side of the board, we can have what's called a promotion. If I push the pawn to the edge of the board, I can get back a queen, knight, rook, or bishop. And typically, we're going to want to go with which piece and why. Hopefully, you said the queen because she's most powerful. So that would be a great starting move for white here. And notice how the pawn becomes the queen. We take the pawn off the board and replace it with the queen. And if you've ever purchased a chess set, you'll notice that most chess sets come with 2 queens. It's because you can have as many queens on the board as you have pawns plus your starting queen. So, what are our other movements with pawns? Pawns start on the 2nd or 7th rank in starting a game, which we'll see when we're working on board setup next. On its initial time being touched, a pawn has the option to move 1 square or 2 squares forward. So in this case, this pawn could go 2, or this pawn could go 1. Pawns can capture 1 square diagonally. So in this case, this pawn can capture this one. But once I push this pawn here, can this pawn affect this one? No. Pawns can only capture 1 square diagonally. They move forward but capture diagonally. That's what makes them different than all the other pieces. The final rule with pawns is called en passant, which is literally translated to in passing. So the initial rules of chess had pawns only moving 1 square forward all the time. But when the rules of the game changed and pawns could move 2 forward, let me take back a move to illustrate. We honored the old rules of the game, allowing a pawn to still capture here. Remember, pawns capture 1 square diagonally, so we can take. So let's see that in instant replay here. If I play c3, he can take. And if I play c4, passing him, I still have the option to take, and that is en passant. So that will cover our rules with the pawn. Now, let's close out this video with board setup. So first of all, we have our pawns. And when we're setting up the board, they go on the 2nd rank and the 7th rank. Next, we're going to want to put our rooks in the corner. We get 2 of those. Then knights. Then bishops. Now we have to worry about our royalty. This is where people get confused with setting up the board, and this is why it's important to have your board oriented correctly. If you turn the board sideways here, it inverts the colors of king and queen. And this is one of the biggest pet peeves of actual chess players. When we're watching a TV program and we see a board set up that is misoriented, and it happens all the time in our movie culture and pop culture in general. So if you're going to ever set up a chessboard for a picture, make sure you have these 2 things correct. 1, the board is oriented correctly. And then 2, where to put the king and queen. Well, it's going to be the queen on her own color. And we have colorful expressions in chess, like the dress matches the shoes. In this case, the white queen, light square or white square underneath. The dark queen or black queen, you have the dark square or black square underneath. And then that leaves, finally, the king. So let's do a little bit of a recap. So far, we've talked about all of our chess pieces and a good number of the rules in chess. But the general principles of chess have: we're playing for checkmate, we're playing to win, and there are 3 results in chess. You can win, you can lose, you can draw. The goal of chess itself is to checkmate your opponent's king. Now, some general principles. When starting a game of chess, and we have an initial game here, white always moves first. That is, the initial movement is taken by white, always. So in this case, I could move my knight on the first move, and players take turns moving. In this case, black moves a pawn out. You cannot skip a turn in chess, and we take turns, making it completely fair from this point. So hopefully you've enjoyed this introduction to chess, and if you're still hazy, because it's a lot to take in when initially playing a game, and if you're like me, you like to actually get into it, check out the second video where I show you how you can practice peace movement on lichess.org. Thanks for joining me. If this has been helpful for you, please give us a like and a subscribe. Thanks.